Steve, I'm sorry, you're working in Africa, and you've got an agroecology program working with farmers and trying to get them to look at farming systems a different way. How do you compete in teaching sort of like agroecology methods versus the big seed companies and the other ones that have all the power and the money?
Yeah, well, let me give you an example of that. And I really appreciated the last comment by the opening speaker on needing to create an alternative, system. And I think it's really about how do we transition to that. And there's a lot of documentation and research out there about the need to do that. So we see we've heard a lot about these 2.5 billion family farmers, people involved in family farming around the world. We see them as real innovators, and how can they be empowered to generate the solutions to a lot of the problems that the world is facing, including their own challenges with hunger and climate change, et cetera. So Groundswell works in 8 countries in Africa and Latin America and Asia. And just to give an example of what it means when we think of democratizing innovation, I'll just take a specific example of a woman named Damata from Burkina Faso, eastern Burkina Faso. And she, like a lot of people across the Sahel in Africa, is facing a severe soil fertility crisis on her farm, having trouble, producing enough food for her farm, can't generate income to send her children to school, is having to strip her assets and sell animals and things like this, and becoming more and more vulnerable if they're hit with harder shocks. So the reason for that is something that's really common across the Sahel and Africa, is that in the past people used to fallow their land. They used to leave their land for 10 to 20 years and move on, and then they would cut new land. They would clear the trees, burn them off, and then come back to that land after 10 to 20 years, after producing in the cleared land for a few years. And it was restored, the soil was restored through the natural fallowing processes. But as population pressures of people and animals have increased, it hasn't been possible. And people are staying on the same land, and then you have climate change, and farmers need to, like Damata, need to produce more on the same land with increasing pressure on it. So this is leading to this situation of soil fertility and hunger crisis across the Sahel. So working with her and other farmers, we set up a program of we work on farmer innovation and scaling testing and scaling agroecological farming practices, and spreading those farmer to farmer, and then also connecting to trying to create more enabling policies and local markets. So specifically we organized a series of villages there, and Damata was one of the people involved with that, and was selected by our community to be involved in this farmer experimentation process, testing ways they could improve their soil fertility and overcome this crisis. And there are practices that work, that's the good news, and the question is, how do we scale them and why aren't they scaling? And so one of those practices which the farmers tested is called zai holes, which are like small catchment basins that the farmers dig into their land about a meter around and a foot or so deep, and putting some compost into them and planting in them. So when the rains come, you have hard pan soils, which are like this stage, and they just run off. But when the rains come, they catch like 4 or 5 times the amount of rain and allow production to increase and the soil fertility to come back. So in the first year, Damata saw that her production was increasing about 75%, and then other neighbors noticed that, and other farmers are also experimenting the same way, and they begin to share these practices, farmer to farmer. And then a second part of the process was connecting them to this really exciting movement of regreening the Sahel, which is, there's some really, as I said, exciting practices around. Even though farmers have been clearing their land of trees, farmers and NGOs and scientists, people have noticed that there's a living forest of the stumps and the roots under the land. So how about dialoguing with farmers about letting those trees regenerate on the farms and seeing which ones are good for restoring organic matter, or fixed nitrogen, or fodder for animals, or firewood. And so we organized a cross visit to another set of villages that have achieved this and really changed their landscape and helped to regreen things, and with these community groups of which Damata is a part of. And now they've come back and they have beginning to do this on their own land. And this is a innovation which is I think very democratic and is expanding at scale. I mean, you can even see satellite photos across parts of the Sahel with increased tree cover. and leading to all these benefits, including increased food production. So the last part of it is trying to get these organized groups to be in dialogue with their, for example, their government officials, local district planning processes on food security, so that they can say, for example, instead of investing 50% of our Ministry of Agriculture budget in chemical fertilizers, why not support these processes that work and scale them? So there's a number of steps involved, but we see tremendous hope and potential working with farmers in that way.
Are governments responsive?
They can be, and we are working in this program I mentioned directly with INERA is the research agency, the research arm of the Ministry of Agriculture in Burkina Faso, and they're a part of this process with us. So that's part of it is to, we can't do it in isolation, is to, build understanding with them and build collaboration with them. So they've been, collaborators in this process.
Well, see, I think what for essentially an outsider like me, listening to your story, it's like, why everything that you argue about, increased yields, soil fertility, increased soil fertility, feeding hungry populations, all these just seem like no-brainers. Where would the resistance to try to spreading this come from?
Well, it doesn't, the approach I'm describing, agroecological approach, doesn't open up markets, for chemical fertilizers or external seeds or pesticides, so there's a lack of interest for those who are interested in those opportunities. And in low-income countries like Burkina Faso, sometimes the research ministry, part of their budget is paid for by external grants and development agencies who perhaps want to introduce some of those practices. So you do have major corporate interests also influencing as well. And I think it's part of this whole just change process of creating a tipping points and seeing that this is a viable alternative, and why not scale it and spread it. And just kind of a paradigm shift as well for opening up, how agronomists and people in ag ministries, et cetera, have been trained over the years is not necessarily in line with what I'm describing.